When we think about our childhood, most of us have this tendency to normalize whatever we experienced, even when those experiences were far from healthy or nurturing. We tell ourselves that our family was normal, that the way we were raised was just how things were supposed to be. But here's something that might shift your perspective entirely. Your childhood wasn't normal, it was just familiar. And this distinction is absolutely crucial for understanding how our early experiences continue to shape our adult lives in ways we often don't even realize. The human brain has this remarkable ability to adapt to almost any circumstance, especially during childhood, when we're most vulnerable and dependent on our caregivers. This adaptation mechanism is actually a survival strategy. When a child grows up in an environment where emotional needs aren't consistently met, where there's chaos, neglect, or even outright abuse, the developing mind doesn't have the luxury of recognizing these conditions as abnormal. Instead, it accepts them as reality and develops coping mechanisms accordingly. This is what we call adaptive behavior, and while it helps us survive childhood, it often creates patterns that become problematic in adulthood. Consider how a child's nervous system develops in response to their environment. If a child grows up in a household where there's constant tension, where they never know what mood their parent will be in when they come home, or where their emotional expressions are consistently dismissed or criticized, their nervous system learns to be hypervigilant. This isn't a conscious choice, it's a biological adaptation. The child's brain literally rewires itself to expect danger, to scan for threats, to suppress natural emotions that might provoke anger or rejection from caregivers. This becomes their normal, their baseline state of being. What's particularly fascinating is how this adaptation process affects our understanding of love, safety, and relationships. When a child experiences inconsistent caregiving, where love feels conditional or unpredictable, they don't think to themselves, "This isn't how love should feel." Instead, they internalize this experience as what love is. They learn that love comes with conditions, that it can be withdrawn at any moment, that they need to earn it through performance or compliance. This becomes their template for all future relationships, their unconscious blueprint for what feels familiar and therefore what feels like love. The challenging part is how familiarity often gets confused with comfort or rightness. We're drawn to what feels familiar because our nervous system recognizes it, even when that familiarity is actually recreating patterns of stress, dysfunction, or emotional unavailability. This is why so many people find themselves repeatedly entering relationships that mirror the dynamics of their childhood home, even when those dynamics were unhealthy. It's not that they consciously choose dysfunction, it's that dysfunction feels like home.
This pattern extends far beyond romantic relationships. It affects how we show up in friendships, how we relate to authority figures, how we handle conflict, and even how we treat ourselves. If criticism was the primary form of communication in your household, you might find yourself drawn to highly critical people, or develop a harsh inner critic that constantly judges your every move. If emotional expression was discouraged or punished, you might struggle with emotional intimacy, or find yourself attracted to emotionally unavailable partners. The workplace becomes another arena where these childhood patterns play out. Someone who grew up walking on eggshells around an unpredictable parent might find themselves overly accommodating with difficult colleagues or bosses. They might have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, always trying to manage other people's emotions or prevent conflict, even at the expense of their own well-being. This isn't conscious behavior. It's the nervous system responding to familiar cues in the only way it knows how. Understanding this doesn't mean we should blame our parents or caregivers. Most parents are doing their best with the tools and awareness they have, often repeating patterns they learned in their own childhoods. The point isn't to assign blame, but to recognize that what we experienced as children has shaped us in profound ways, and that recognizing these patterns is the first step toward changing them. One of the most important realizations is that our childhood experiences don't just affect our emotional responses, they actually change our physiology. Chronic stress during childhood can alter the development of various body systems, affecting everything from immune function to digestive health to cardiovascular resilience. When we're constantly in a state of hypervigilance or emotional suppression, our bodies pay the price. This helps explain why many people who experienced childhood trauma develop physical health issues in adulthood that seem to have no clear medical cause. The nervous system that developed to help us survive childhood continues to operate as if those childhood conditions still exist. Even when we're adults living in relatively safe circumstances, our internal alarm system might still be activated by situations that remind us, consciously or unconsciously, of childhood stress. This can manifest as anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, autoimmune conditions, or a host of other physical and emotional symptoms that seem to appear without clear cause.
But here's where hope enters the picture. The same neuroplasticity that allowed our brains to adapt to childhood circumstances can also help us heal and develop new patterns in adulthood. When we begin to recognize that our childhood experiences weren't normal, just familiar, we open the door to questioning the beliefs, behaviors, and reactions that we've carried into our adult lives. This recognition is often the beginning of profound healing and transformation. The process of healing begins with awareness. It starts with gently questioning the stories we tell ourselves about our childhood and our family. Maybe your family wasn't as functional as you've convinced yourself it was. Maybe the way you were treated wasn't actually okay, even if it was all you knew. Maybe the emotional climate of your home was more stressful or neglectful than you've allowed yourself to acknowledge. This isn't about creating drama or victimizing yourself. It's about honestly assessing your experience so you can understand how it's affecting your life today. Have you ever noticed how certain situations or interactions trigger emotional responses that seem disproportionate to what's actually happening? How you might feel overwhelmed by conflict that others seem to handle easily, or how you might struggle with boundaries in ways that feel confusing even to yourself. These responses often have their roots in childhood experiences that taught your nervous system to react in particular ways. When we understand this connection, we can begin to respond to our triggers with compassion rather than judgment. Thank you for taking the time to explore these ideas with me. You're here on the channel Not What It Seems, where we dive deep into the psychological patterns that shape our lives, bringing you daily content that challenges conventional thinking and offers new perspectives on mental health, relationships, and personal growth. Now, as we continue exploring this topic, it's important to recognize that healing from childhood patterns isn't about completely erasing our past or becoming someone entirely different. It's about developing awareness of how our past influences our present, and then consciously choosing how we want to respond, rather than simply reacting from old programming. This is what we call moving from unconscious reaction to conscious response.
The journey of healing often involves grieving. We grieve for the childhood we didn't have, for the emotional attunement we missed, for the sense of safety and security that should have been our birthright. This grief is necessary and healthy. It's how we begin to separate what was from what could have been, and how we start to create space for new possibilities in our lives. Many people resist this grief because they've been taught that they should be grateful for what they had, that others had it worse, or that dwelling on the past is unproductive. But acknowledging our losses doesn't diminish our gratitude or keep us stuck in the past. It actually frees us to move forward with greater authenticity and self-compassion. One of the most powerful shifts happens when we begin to reparent ourselves. This means learning to provide for our own emotional needs in ways that our caregivers couldn't or didn't. It means developing a kind, nurturing inner voice to counter the critical voice that might have been internalized from childhood. It means setting boundaries that protect our emotional well-being, even when this feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable. It means learning to recognize and honor our own feelings, needs, and desires, rather than constantly adapting to what others expect from us. This reparenting process often involves rediscovering parts of ourselves that were suppressed or neglected during childhood. Maybe you were naturally creative, but learned to suppress this creativity because it wasn't valued in your family. Maybe you were sensitive and empathetic, but learned to hide these qualities because they were seen as weakness. Maybe you were naturally curious and questioning, but learned to comply and conform to avoid conflict. Healing involves reconnecting with these authentic parts of ourselves and learning to express them in healthy ways. The path forward isn't about perfection or completely healing from all childhood wounds. It's about developing a different relationship with our past and our patterns. Instead of being unconsciously controlled by them, we can learn to recognize them, understand their origins, and consciously choose how we want to respond. This is what emotional freedom looks like, not the absence of triggers or difficult emotions, but the ability to meet them with awareness and choice rather than automatic reaction. Understanding that our childhood wasn't normal but familiar also helps us develop deeper compassion for ourselves and others. When we recognize that everyone is operating from patterns developed in childhood, we can begin to see difficult behaviors in ourselves and others, not as character flaws, but as adaptations that once served a purpose. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does provide a framework for understanding and healing, rather than judgment and shame.
The healing journey is rarely linear. There will be moments of breakthrough and moments of setback. There will be days when you feel like you've made tremendous progress, and days when old patterns seem to reassert themselves with surprising intensity. This is normal and expected. Healing happens in layers, and each layer that's processed creates space for deeper understanding and more authentic living. As you continue on this journey, remember that seeking support is a sign of strength, not weakness. Whether through therapy, support groups, or trusted friends and family members, having witnesses to our healing process can be incredibly valuable. Sometimes we need others to help us see patterns we can't see ourselves, or to provide the emotional attunement we missed in childhood. This isn't dependence, it's interdependence, the healthy human need for connection and support. The goal isn't to completely transcend our past, but to integrate it in a way that serves our highest good. Our childhood experiences, even the difficult ones, have given us certain strengths and insights that we might not have developed otherwise. Maybe your early experiences taught you to be highly attuned to others' emotions, making you naturally empathetic and compassionate. Maybe they taught you resilience and the ability to adapt to challenging circumstances. The key is learning to use these strengths in ways that serve you rather than deplete you. As we near the end of our exploration together, I want to leave you with this thought. Recognizing that your childhood wasn't normal but familiar is not about creating a victim story or dwelling in the past. It's about reclaiming your power to create a different present and future. When we understand how our past has shaped us, we gain the ability to consciously reshape ourselves. We can choose to break cycles that no longer serve us and create new patterns that align with our authentic selves and values. The journey of healing and self-discovery is one of the most courageous things you can undertake. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to feel difficult emotions. But it also opens the door to a life of greater authenticity, deeper relationships, and genuine self-compassion. You deserve to live from a place of conscious choice rather than unconscious reaction. And recognizing that your childhood was familiar rather than normal is an important step in that direction.
Remember, you have the power to create new patterns, to heal old wounds, and to live from a place of authenticity rather than adaptation. Your past doesn't have to determine your future, but understanding it can absolutely transform your present. Take this exploration as an invitation to look at your own life with curiosity and compassion, and to remember that healing is always possible, no matter how old those patterns might be. If this content resonated with you and offered you a new perspective on your own experience, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to give it a like. Your engagement helps this message reach others who might need to hear it. And if you feel called to share your own reflections or experiences related to this topic, I invite you to leave a comment below. Sometimes sharing our stories helps others feel less alone in their journey. If you're interested in exploring more content like this, there's another video appearing on your screen right now that might offer additional insights. And if you'd like to join our community here at Not What It Seems, where we explore these deeper psychological truths daily, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for your time, your openness, and your commitment to understanding yourself more deeply.